The rain wouldn't stop that night. It felt like punishment, drumming against the old cabin's roof, washing away the last traces of hope I still had. My body trembled as I held my daughter close, whispering to her to stay quiet, to breathe, to pretend the world outside didn't exist. But the world always finds you when you're weakest. I heard their voices first, the rogues, men who once called themselves my kin. Their boots crushed the mud outside, their laughter sounded like knives scraping metal. They had already taken everything from me, my home, my dignity, my faith in mercy, but tonight they wanted blood. I pushed my little girl, Alina, beneath the table and pressed my finger to my lips. No sound, my love. No matter what happens. The door burst open before I could finish. The leader stepped in, eyes red, breath soaked in rage. He said I'd betrayed the pack. He said I deserved to die. I didn't argue. I only looked at him and thought of how pain always smells the same, like smoke and iron. The first strike took my breath away. The second stole my balance. The third one made me forget what fear even felt like. When it was over, I was on the floor, and all I could hear was Alina's muffled cry. They left when they thought I was dead. Maybe I should have been. But mothers don't die until their children are safe. I gathered what strength I had left and whispered to her, "Run, find help." She shook her tiny head, tears glistening in the candlelight. "Mama, I can't leave you. You must." I smiled through blood. "Find the big house beyond the river. Knock until someone opens. Tell them they beat your mama." I watched her vanish into the storm, a flicker of light in endless dark. Then everything went silent. The next thing I remember is the sound of thunder, and a deep, commanding voice cutting through it. "Who are you, child?" That was him, the Alpha King. I didn't see it, but I imagine how it happened, his tall frame at the grand doors of his fortress, rain dripping from his cloak, the silver glow of his eyes narrowing as he saw my daughter standing there, soaked and shaking. "She's dying," Alina must have said, clutching her tiny fists. "They beat my mama," and something inside that monster of a man broke. They said the Alpha King's heart died long ago, burned away with his mate in the war. They said no cry could touch him. But that night, a child's voice pierced through every wall he'd built. He lifted her into his arms and whispered something no one ever expected from him. "Show me the way." When I woke again, it wasn't the cold floor beneath me, it was warmth. Firelight, the scent of pine and smoke. I tried to move, but strong hands stopped me gently. "Don't," he said. His voice was rough, ancient, filled with command, and something else. Regret, maybe. I opened my eyes. A man stood there, dark hair, scar across his jaw, eyes that looked like storm clouds remembering how to cry. He was terrifying, but safe. "You're the Alpha King." "Yes," he said quietly. "And you're safe now." I tried to speak, but my throat burned. "Why?" He looked at the little girl asleep beside me. "Because she knocked." He turned away before I could answer, as if the truth of that simple sentence hurt him. Days passed, wrapped in silence. The healers came and went. The palace was colder than stone, yet wherever Alina ran, warmth followed. She made even the soldiers smile, and somehow, she made the Alpha King stay longer each day. Sometimes I caught him watching her from afar, not with the eyes of a ruler, but of a man remembering what it meant to protect. And sometimes, when the wind whispered through the halls, I felt his gaze shift to me. We never spoke about that night. But there was something between us, like a wound that wanted to heal. One evening, as the sun dyed crimson behind the mountains, he stood by my door. "They'll come for you," he said. "Whoever hurt you. Rogues never leave unfinished work." I sat up slowly. "Then let them come." A shadow of a smile crossed his lips, the kind that never reached the eyes. "You sound like me." "I sound like a mother." He nodded once. "Then I'll fight beside you." That night, for the first time in years, I didn't dream of blood. I dreamed of safety, of my daughter's laughter echoing through marble halls, and of a man who wasn't supposed to care, learning how to love again. And I realized, sometimes salvation doesn't come with wings. Sometimes it knocks on your door in the middle of a storm and says, "They beat my mama." The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't mean peace, it means waiting. Every sunrise felt like a question the universe refused to answer. The bruises on my skin began to fade, but the ones inside, they stayed. I could still hear the echoes of that night, their laughter, my daughter's scream, and the silence that followed when my world collapsed. But here, in the Alpha King's palace, silence had a different sound. It was made of marble and secrets. Of soldiers who bowed too quickly, of servants who never met your eyes. And somewhere inside that silence, he walked. Kale, the Alpha King. He was everywhere and nowhere. His presence filled every corridor even when he wasn't there. I'd hear his boots on the stone floor long before I saw him, heavy, deliberate, like each step carried the weight of ghosts he never buried. Sometimes I'd see him from the balcony, standing in the rain, watching the forest like it owed him something. A man who had ruled with iron, but now looked as if the iron had melted and burned him from the inside. I didn't understand him, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. Alina, on the other hand, understood everything her little heart could. She'd run through the halls with her wild curls bouncing, her laughter echoing off the walls that hadn't heard joy in years. The guards would stop and stare, half confused, half charmed. She'd call them wolves and giggle when they pretended to growl. And when Kale appeared, tall, silent, terrifying, she'd just smile at him like he was the safest man alive. He'd freeze every time, as if unsure how to react. But then he'd do something no one expected, kneel down to her level and listen. One afternoon, I found them in the garden. Alina was holding a wilted flower, trying to make it bloom again with tiny fingers. "You can't fix a broken flower," I said softly from the steps. She looked up at me, then at him. "Baba can," she said innocently. Kale's eyes widened, startled, not by the word itself, but by what it meant. Baba, a word that hadn't belonged to him in a lifetime. He looked at me, then at the ground, and for a fleeting second, I saw something raw and fragile in that ruthless man. Something human. He took the flower from her hand, pressed it between his palms, and when he opened them, the petals glowed faintly, healed, alive. Alina gasped. "See, Mama? I told you." Kale smiled faintly. "Wolves don't cry," he said. "They fix what they can." I didn't know whether to thank him or run. That night, I couldn't sleep. The storm had returned, whispering against the glass. I sat by the window, watching lightning crawl across the sky. The sound of footsteps made me turn, and there he was again. He didn't knock. He never did. "You shouldn't be alone during storms," he said quietly. "I've survived worse than rain," I replied. "I know." His gaze softened. "I was there when she knocked." I looked down. "She shouldn't have. It wasn't your responsibility." "Maybe not," he said, stepping closer. "But fate doesn't ask permission." The air between us thickened, heavy with unspoken things. I could feel the heat of him even across the room, wild, restrained, dangerous. "She saved you," he murmured. I frowned. "Who?" "Alina. Without her, I'd still be a king of ashes." He turned away before I could answer, his cloak brushing the floor like a whisper of regret. And then, softer than I expected, he added, "You look better when you don't pretend you're not afraid." Before I could speak, he was gone. Days bled into weeks. The palace began to change. The guards stopped whispering about the human woman. The healers smiled when Alina passed by. Even the cold stone walls seemed to breathe again. "And Kale?" he smiled, "sometime." Not much, not often, but enough to remind me that even broken wolves remember warmth. One evening, while tending to the fire, I asked him, "Why did you help us, really?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes followed the flames, his jaw tightening. "Because once," he said slowly, "someone knocked for me, and no one opened." His words struck something deep in me, a place that still believed in redemption. You don't have to keep saving others to atone, I whispered. He looked at me, and his eyes softened like the edge of night turning into dawn. Maybe I'm not saving others, he said. Maybe I'm saving myself. That night, as I tucked Alina into bed, she asked, Mama, will Baba always keep us safe? I brushed her hair back gently. He's not your Baba, sweetheart. She yawned and smiled. He will be, I can tell. And somehow, I believed her. Later, I stepped out onto the balcony. The moon was full, cold and watchful. Kale stood there too, staring out into the forest. They're moving, he said without looking at me. The rogues who hurt you. They've crossed the border. My chest tightened. Then it isn't over. He turned to me, his eyes glowing faintly silver. Not yet. But I won't let them reach you. Why? I whispered. He stepped closer until his breath brushed my cheek. Because I've already lost enough. I should have stepped back. I didn't. In that moment, I realized, danger wasn't always in claws or fangs. Sometimes, it stood right in front of you, whispering like mercy. And for the first time since that cursed night, I wasn't afraid. Because for reasons I didn't yet understand, the Alpha King, who once ruled with fury, was beginning to fight for me. And I was beginning to let him. I felt the shift before the bells rang. It was subtle at first, the kind of change the body knows before the mind does. The air thinned, the birds went silent, and somewhere beyond the tree line, an old cough of danger cleared its throat. I was pouring water for Alina when the first horn sounded from the eastern wall. The cup trembled in my hand. Water rippled. Alina looked up at me with those bright, stubborn eyes that refused to be taught fear. Is it the bad wolves? She whispered. I knelt, pressed my forehead to hers. It's a reminder, I said gently. To be brave the quiet way. The quiet way? She asked. The kind where your heart is steady even when your hands aren't. Another horn. Closer. Then boots. The corridor outside filled with the thud of urgency, soldiers moving like a single living thing. I could feel him in the noise. Kale didn't need to be seen to be known. The entire palace had learned his heartbeat. The door opened without a knock. It was him. Stay inside, he said to me, voice low, controlled, already iron. His eyes slid to Alina, and for a breath, the iron trembled. You, little wolf, he said softly, you keep your mother safe. She nodded, solemn as a queen. Yes, Baba. His jaw tightened at the word, and the soldier who'd lived on ash inhaled like he'd tasted rain. He turned to leave, then paused. Arya, he said, not quite facing me, if anything happens, it won't, I answered, not because I knew, but because I chose to believe him. You promised. He lifted his gaze. The promise became law. The door shut. The footsteps vanished into the river of war. I didn't breathe for a while. Then I did the only thing I could. I lit candles. I opened the window to listen. I wrapped Alina in a shawl and told her a story with my hands. How wolves used to sing to the moon not to be heard, but to remember who they were. She leaned against me, small and fierce. Mama, she murmured. Yes, my love. If the bad wolves come, will you be afraid? I thought of the cabin floor, the iron taste of failure, the quiet that follows a scream. I looked at my daughter, and I found the truth where it always lives, behind love. I will be whatever I need to be to keep you safe, I said. Even if I have to learn it now. She nodded like she understood everything. Maybe she did. The horns stopped. For a moment, the world waited. Then the forest answered. Not with howls. Those are loud, proud, eager things. The forest answered with a low, dragging hush, the sound a blade makes when pulled from old wood. The rogues weren't charging, they were creeping. They wanted to be shadows with teeth. I shut the window. And still, I heard them. The first knock wasn't on our door. It echoed down the hall, 2 rooms over, then another, 3 doors left, a test of locks, of patience. I stood, placed Alina behind the bed, and pulled the lowest drawer of the dresser. Beneath folded linen, my fingers found the hidden weight Kale had pressed into my palm 2 nights ago without a word. A slim, balanced dagger in a leather sheath, the handle worn by someone else's past. Use it if you must, he'd said then, the words barely air. I'd almost asked him why he trusted me with a blade. I didn't. Tonight, I was simply grateful. The next knock came closer. Soft, almost polite. A lie wearing manners. I motioned Alina to be silent. The latch of our door lifted not by hand, but by patience. A sliver of darkness slid into the room. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The door edged open. I spoke before the intruder could. You won't like what you find here, I said, and I kept my voice calm, like cool water laid over a spark. We are not prizes. We are consequences. The door stopped. The shadow inside the frame shifted, surprised, then irritated. A man's voice, thin and eager to be cruel. You talk vey for someone we already broke. Then you should fear what I learned while broken, I replied. Silence. Then a hissed laugh. We're only a whisper from your king's throat. You think he can hold every door at once? No, I said, turning the blade in my palm until it fit like a promise. But I can hold mine. The door swung wider. He stepped into the candlelight, scar over his left eye, the kind men wear like medals for sins. He saw the dagger. He smiled without softness. Do you know how to use it? He asked. No, I said simply. But I know how to survive you. He lunged. I did not meet him. I moved. When you've been hunted, your body learns maps of small spaces. The edge of the bed becomes a barrier, the chair a lever, the wall a friend. He wasn't expecting a dance made from refusal. He stumbled on the rug. I cut, shallow and deliberate, across the back of his hand. He screamed, a sound that means, I'm shocked you fought back. From the corridor, other footsteps. A second rogue, a third. Baba. Alina cried, not to the door, not to the corridor, but to the world itself. A roar answered. It shook the glass in the window. It shook me. I have seen courage, quiet, fragile, persistent. What broke through our door was the kind that wears a body. Cale didn't enter so much as arrive. He was not a man then, he was what a man becomes when love chooses him as a weapon. He crossed the space in a single breath, slammed the first rogue into the wall with a precision that preserved candle flame and mercy, then pivoted between me and the second in a motion too smooth to be rage. Out, he said to the two soldiers behind him. No blood in this room. The second rogue drew steel. He didn't find air enough to lift it. Cale's hand closed around the man's wrist, quiet, final. The blade clanged to the floor, more embarrassed than defeated. The first rogue tried the hallway. He found the hallway full of wolves with Cale's eyes. Take them, Cale said, and his voice was a verdict. The rogues were dragged out. The corridor exhaled. The room remembered its candles. Cale turned to Alina first. He always did. Are you hurt? He asked, kneeling as though kingship meant knees that learned to bend. She shook her head, then flung her arms around his neck. I called, she whispered into his collar, and you came. I will always come, he said. He looked over her shoulder at me then, the question already in his eyes. Are you hurt? Are you afraid? Did I fail you? I shook my head. I held my door, I said. Something like pride, and something like sorrow, passed through him. He nodded once, then stood, his attention shifting outward again, toward the halls, the walls, the woods, the war. They're testing us, he said. They want me spread thin, bleeding by inches. Hey, want to make the palace into 100 little battles. His gaze sharpened. They don't understand. This place learned how to be one thing. What thing? I asked. A home, he said. He didn't smile when he said it. He didn't need to. The night lengthened. The attacks changed shape. No more polite knocks, just scratches along the borders, distant howls that ended mid-note, the metallic chatter of challenges met and answered. Cale moved like a shadow that learned discipline, here, then there, then everywhere the danger tried to be. I saw him only in fragments, a cloak turning a corner, a hand steadying a frightened servant, a command, low and sure, that bent fear into purpose. I tended the small kingdom of our room. I fed Alina slices of apple dipped in honey. I told her stories that ended softly. I put my palm against the stones, whispering gratitude into the house that kept faith with us. Toward midnight, the sounds dimmed. Tiredness prowled the edges of the halls. I was laying Alina into bed when Kale returned, quiet, not to startle us. The line of his shoulders said enough, no victory song, but no funeral, either. They'll pull back before dawn, he said. Cowards prefer darkness they think belongs to them. Does it? I asked. Not anymore, he said, and for a moment, the flicker of a smile touched his mouth. I tucked the blanket under Alina's chin. She was already half asleep, guarding the world in her dreams. Kale's gaze moved between us like a promise he was teaching himself to keep. Rest, he said. I've set the inner ring. No one gets within these corridors without bleeding for the attempt. You said no blood in this room, I murmured. In the corridor, I did not promise gentleness, he answered, and there was a tired humor in him, the kind you only find after you've held a line and kept it human. He stepped to the door, then stopped. The pause felt like a cliff we were both willing to approach now. He turned back. Arya, he said, voice lower, quieter, not the king's but the man's. I need you to tell me the names you remember. Of the men who hurt me? I asked. He nodded. If they are at these borders, I don't want to kill strangers. I want to end what actually exists. The old shame lifted its head, thin, persistent, foolish. I met his eyes and let it burn. I remember too many, I said. But I won't let them live inside me longer than they live outside. Good, he said. Then we'll finish both. He turned again to go. My voice found him before the door did. Kale, I said softly. He looked back. The candlelight made him gentler than legend. You came when she called, I said. But you also came when I didn't. He took that in like a man learning how to accept water. I hear both of you, he said. Even when you're silent. The door closed. I stood very still and let the truth of it change the shape of the room. I woke just before dawn to a peace that felt newly born. No horns, no footsteps, the kind of quiet that means someone else kept watch while you slept. Alina stirred, blinking into the pale light. Is it morning? It is, I said. Did we win? We're still here, I replied. That counts as victory when the night tries to erase you. A soft rap, 3 gentle taps, sounded at the door. Not a test, a courtesy. I opened it to find a young guard, cheeks windburned, eyes bright with triumph he was trying to hide behind discipline. The king asks if you'll join him in the east courtyard, he said. Only if you feel strong enough. I do, I answered, surprised to find it true. We dressed in simple things. Alina slipped her small hand into mine, and we followed the guard through a palace that smelled faintly of smoke and pine and something else. Like metal that had cooled without taking a shape it would regret. The courtyard was washed in gray light. The walls bore fresh scars, the ground, fresh footprints. Kale stood at the far end, speaking with his captains in low, precise tones. He looked like midnight deciding to forgive morning. When he saw us, the business of war paused. Come, he said. His captains stepped back, made space. He led us to the gate. Beyond it, the forest stood quiet, nursing its secrets. A handful of captured rogues knelt in the dirt, bound, defiant in ways that have nothing to do with courage. Kale's voice was calm. Tell her, he said to the one with the scar over his left eye. The man spat blood at the ground. Pride shivered in the cold. He looked at me finally, with a hatred that required an audience. We weren't here for you, he sneered. We were here for him. To drag your little sob story through his halls until he begged for it to end. I felt my heart go very still. And did he? I asked. The rogue's gaze flicked to Kale, then away. He doesn't seem to know how. Kale's eyes remained on me, not on them. You're not a message, he said. You're a person. In this territory, that's the only thing that matters. He raised a hand, just a fraction. The guards moved the rogues aside. It wasn't a show of mercy or cruelty. It was order reasserting itself without shouting. Kale turned to me. This won't be the last attempt, he said. When men lose their power over a story, they tend to repeat their worst chapters. And we, I answered, will write new ones. Something eased in his face then, the way a knot loosens when you stop pulling and start understanding where it began. He reached down, and Alina slipped her hand into his without hesitation. The sight stole my breath. Not because it was strange, but because T was right. She looked up at him. Does this mean the bad wolves will stop? They may never stop trying, he said honestly. But trying is not the same as winning. She thought about that, nodded like a tiny general, then lifted their joined hands as if raising a banner. The captains looked away and smiled because some moments don't belong to war. Kale's gaze found mine across the small distance that no longer felt so large. I'm convening the council at dusk, he said. I want you there. Me? The word surprised me. I was a woman with scars and a soul stitched back together with stubbornness. The council was for men who believed rooms belonged to them. You are the reason this place became what it pretends it already was, he said. They should hear the story from the person who survived it. I swallowed. And if they don't like the version where the king listens, then they'll learn to like it, he answered, a ghost of humor returning, or they'll learn to live outside my walls. Alina squeezed his hand. Baba, she said, small and sure, I'm hungry. He glanced down, softened in a way that would have terrified the man he used to be. Then breakfast becomes law, he said lightly. We walked back through the gate together, the king, the woman who'd learned to hold a door, and the child who taught us both what to call a promise. The courtyard exhaled us into morning. The palace opened like a book ready for a kinder chapter. Behind us, the forest kept its counsel. Ahead of us, the day waited, bright the way steel is bright when it chooses to be a mirror instead of a blade. I didn't know what the council would do at dusk. But I knew this. The rogues had returned and found a different kingdom than the one they'd left behind. They had come for a man who used to be all wrath, expecting to win with fear. They'd met a home instead. Homes are harder to break. They're made of more than walls. And as we reached the stair, Kale looked at me the way men look when battle strategy becomes something they're willing to call hope. Arya, he said, voice soft in the new light, thank you for holding your door. I smiled. Thank you for knocking on mine. He paused, as if memorizing the shape of those words. Then he nodded once, ruling as gently as a man like him can, and led us inside. Dusk would bring the council. Night would remember our names. And for the first time since the storm that broke us, I wanted the hours to hurry. Not to hide from darkness, but to meet it, together. The palace looked different when the sun began to fall. Light filtered through high-stained glass windows, painting the hallways in colors I hadn't seen in years, soft gold, wine red, the faint shimmer of forgiveness. The war had ended only hours ago, but peace had aura. 80 begun to breathe through the cracks. Kale had summoned the council, a circle of alphas, elders, and warriors who once trembled at the mention of his name. Tonight, they would tremble for another reason. Because the man they expected to meet no longer existed. I dressed simply, no jewels, no silk, just clean linen and the courage I'd learned in silence. Alina followed me, her little hand locked around my wrist as if I might disappear if she let go. Do kings get scared? She asked as we walked toward the council chamber. I smiled faintly. The good ones do. She tilted her head, thinking. Then Baba's a good one. The truth of it warmed something deep inside me. When the heavy doors opened, the room hushed. It was vast, carved stone and firelight, a table that stretched like a scar through the center. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, confusion flickering behind discipline. Kale stood at the head, dressed not in armor but in black robes that carried no insignia. The Alpha King stripped of symbols, only strength, presence, and quiet authority. When he saw us, something in his expression softened, barely visible. He nodded once. You're here, as you asked, I said, meeting his gaze. He looked down at Alina. Little wolf, you can sit beside me. Alina grinned. Because I'm brave? Because you remind us all what that word means. A murmur went through the room, surprise, perhaps even discomfort. Kings didn't share seats with children. But Kale wasn't performing rebellion, he was rebuilding something older than tradition. The meeting began. The first elder, a broad man with silver hair and eyes like frost, spoke first. Your Majesty, you broke protocol by sheltering outsiders. By keeping them. His gaze flicked to me like a blade that didn't deserve to be drawn. Humans don't belong within wolf walls. Kale's response was calm. She bled on my land. That makes her mine to protect. And the child? Kale's eyes darkened. That's not your question to ask. The elder pressed on. The rogues attacked because of them. You risked our kind for my decision. Kale cut in, voice sharp enough to split stone. Not theirs. If you have courage, question your alpha. Not a mother and her child. The room went still. The power in his tone wasn't loud, it was the kind that reminds everyone why silence can be obedience. Another councilman cleared his throat. With respect, Your Majesty, compassion weakens a throne. Kale leaned forward. No, cruelty does. Compassion builds loyalty. You all rule by fear. I've seen where that ends, ashes and graves. He glanced at me. But mercy can rebuild what war ruins. I swallowed hard. He's right, I said before I could stop myself. Dozens of heads turned. For a moment, the air felt like glass. Speak, Kale said gently. I took a breath. My voice trembled, then steadied. You call yourselves wolves. But even wolves protect their wounded. You fight for pride, but the real strength is in what survives after the fight. My daughter and I, we were just a story of pain. He turned it into hope. Alina looked up at me, then at them. Mama's right. Baba's nice. Laughter rippled, soft, nervous, real. Even the oldest alpha couldn't meet her innocence with anger. Kale allowed the moment to breathe before he spoke again. This palace will not be ruled by the ghosts of the past, he declared. From this night, no child will sleep outside my walls. No mother will be hunted. And any alpha who cannot stand beside that law will not stand in my kingdom. His words hit like thunder wrapped in peace. The elders exchanged looks. The challenge was silent, and already lost. One by one, they bowed their heads. Kale nodded once. Then it's done. He rose. The meeting was over, but something larger had begun. When the others left, the room fell quiet. The fire had burned low, its light soft on his face. You shouldn't have spoken, he said finally, but there was no anger in it. I couldn't stay silent, I replied. I know. He smiled faintly. That's why I called you here. I blinked. You wanted me to defy them? I wanted them to hear truth from someone who's lived it. I shook my head. You're rebuilding a kingdom on dangerous ground. He stepped closer, eyes gentle but sure. Then I'll need someone beside me who's not afraid of danger. The meaning beneath his words made my pulse skip. Kale, before I could finish, Alina yawned loudly from his chair. Are you two done talking like grown-ups? He chuckled softly. Almost, little wolf. That night, after she fell asleep, I found Kale in the courtyard, staring at the stars. You changed their laws, I said. He didn't look away from the sky. No, I reminded them we were supposed to have hearts. I stepped beside him. And what about you? His gaze dropped to me, those gray eyes that once only knew command now holding something fragile. I'm learning, he said. Because of you. Because of her. I smiled sadly. She calls you Baba now. He nodded. I know. The word still hurts. Why? Because I never thought I'd earn it again. I wanted to reach out, to take his hand, to tell him he already had, but I didn't. Some truths are too sacred to touch before they're ready. Instead, I whispered, you did the unthinkable, Kale. He turned fully toward me. What's that? You let yourself feel. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then quietly, like a vow, he replied, and I won't stop. The wind moved through the courtyard, gentle and alive. In the distance, wolves howled. Not in warning, but in song. I realized then that peace didn't come from silence. It came from hearts that finally stopped running. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something neither of us knew how to name yet. Morning arrived with soft hands. It touched the stone walls gently, slipped across the floors like a blessing, found its way to the small of my back where old pain used to live and warmed it into silence. The palace didn't look new. It looked healed. There is a difference. New things are flawless. Healed things wear their stories like light. Alina woke first, as always. Hope is an early riser. She rolled toward me, hair a tangle of bravery, and pressed her cheek to my arm. "Do you think the palace knows our names now?" she asked, still half inside her dream. "I think it learned them the night you knocked," I whispered. "And it's been practicing ever since." She nodded like a queen accepting tribute. "Today, we should teach it a song." "What kind of song?" "The kind where everyone gets a turn." I smiled. "Then we'll start with breakfast." We stepped into the corridor, and the corridor stepped toward us, servants with nods that held no pity, guards with smiles they were still getting used to. Somewhere down the hall, a wolf yawned like a drum. I caught the faint metallic scent of oil on hinges. Doors were being maintained. People were planning to stay. In the kitchen, the cooks pretended not to notice the small girl who had already claimed the heart of the house. They accidentally made extra honey cakes. Alina accidentally found them. I thanked the gods for accidents. "Save one for him," I told her, wrapping a cake in a strip of linen. "Kings forget to eat when they remember to care." She hugged the bundle to her chest. "Then I'll be his reminder." We carried our offering toward the training yard, where the sound of steel rose and fell like a steady rain. Kale was there, of course he was. Shirt damp at the throat, forearms marked by the kind of practice that teaches restraint better than rage. He sparred without cruelty. He taught his captains how to end fights without ending men. Watching him was like watching a mountain learn how to move. Alina didn't watch. She ran. "Baba." He turned on the last syllable, caught her without looking, and let the weight of her joy anchor him to the morning. For a heartbeat, he didn't look like a king or a weapon. He looked like a man with something to lose, and that is when men become careful with the world. She held up the wrapped cake with ceremony. "Law says, breakfast." "Does it?" he asked, mouth curving. "New law," she said. Mama approved. "Then no council can overrule it." He untied the linen, broke the cake into thirds, and glanced at me as if asking permission. Ith his eyes. I nodded. We ate as if honey could do more than sweeten, it could absolve. His captains pretended not to watch, failing beautifully. When we finished, he wiped crumbs from Alina's chin with a tenderness that startled even me. "I want to show you something," he said, standing. It was for both of us, though he spoke to her. "A place that belongs to people who make it through storms." We followed him through a narrow passage I'd never noticed, down a set of steps that smelled like quiet, and into a low room where the ceiling held itself up with old beams scarred by time. On the wall hung a single thing, the old standard of the first wolves to settle this land. Not a banner for war. A banner for belonging. "My mother used to bring me here when the palace felt too loud," he said softly, as if the room had taught him volume. "She said, let the past hold you until you remember how to hold yourself." He touched the cloth with the back of his knuckles, gentle as prayer. I thought I'd forgotten this room. I reached for his hand before I could stop myself. He didn't move away. Our fingers didn't lace. They simply existed near each other, learning how to share a small square of air without running. Alina stood beneath the banner, squinting. "Does it have a song?" "It used to," Kale said. "Then we'll make it one," she decided. "Mama says healed things wear their stories like light." He looked at me, surprise and something softer balanced in his gaze. "Does she?" "She does," I said, a little embarrassed to hear my own words repeated in a sacred room. He breathed out, as if relief had found his ribs. "Then today, we start building the part of the kingdom that cannot be breached." "What part is that?" I asked. "The part that lives between people when they choose each other," he said. Walls are useful. Choices are stronger. I wanted to argue with the world that had taught me otherwise. Instead, I chose to believe him for an hour. It felt like choosing sunlight. We began with small things. I asked for a room near the kitchens, a room near the gates, and a room near the training yard. Not grand rooms, rooms that could be opened without ceremony. We filled them with blankets and bandages, with bread, dry wool, and water. We wrote new words over the doors, short words people could carry in their mouths when their hands were full. Warmth. Rest. Listen. The palace learned to say them. Kale watched me organize as if I were laying a charm over stone. He did not correct. He redirected muscle where it could serve kindness. He set watches that faced outward, not inward. He posted a guard at the infirmary, not because the wounded were dangerous, but because the sick should never fear interruption. By noon, the changes had a hum. By evening, hum had a face. Her name was Mara. She arrived with 2 small boys and a 3rd child on the way, clothes cut by worry, eyes bright with the unwilling kind of shame. She stood just inside the gate, posture braced for refusal. I met her there. "You're early," I said. "For what?" she asked, wary. "For dinner," I answered, and watched the word do its work. It loosened something in her shoulders that pain had fastened too tightly. She cried quietly, exactly long enough to taste the relief, then straightened like a beam properly set. Kale came without being summoned, not with guards, but with a blanket. He wrapped it around her and knelt to look the boys in the eye. "Do you know how to announce yourselves?" he asked. They shook their heads. He touched his chest. "Say, we are home." The older boy swallowed. "Tried it. We are home." The younger boy echoed, smaller but bolder. "We are home." Mara's mouth trembled. "Forgive us, Your Majesty." "Forgive what?" Kale asked, truly puzzled. "For needing more than the world said we could have." He glanced at me, and the message passed between us without language. "Let this sentence die here." "Need is not a sin in this place," he said. "It is a map." I took the boys' hands. "Come learn the words over the doors," I told them, bending to their height. Warmth. Rest. Listen. The older boy frowned in concentration. "Listen to what?" "First to your own breath," I said. "Then to the next safe thing." He nodded solemnly, the way small soldiers promise childhood another hour. News of open doors travels faster than war. By dusk, 3 more families had crossed the threshold. By moonrise, an old man who pretended he'd come only to return a borrowed spoon had fallen asleep in a chair under the word rest, snoring like a lullaby. The palace changed shape without shifting a stone. It learned to carry people. Of course, not all change sits quietly. It scratches. It tests. It came in the form of a woman named Lisa, a counselor whose voice sounded like decisions. She cornered me outside the East Room, where a small girl traced the word warmth with her finger as if learning a prayer. "You are kind," Lisa said, as if identifying a disease. "And useful. But useful things can become dangerous when they forget their place." "My place?" I echoed. "Not at the king's side," she said. "Not in his rooms, his councils, his thoughts. We bled to build this court. You arrive with a tragic story and rearrange the furniture." "I arrived with a child who knocked," I said. The king opened. Her eyes cooled. "The king is a man. Men are moved by small hands and softer words. My job is to remember what kingdoms cost. And mine," I answered, steady as a table, "is to ensure they are worth the price." She stepped closer. Too close. "Be careful," she murmured. "There are those who would prefer the palace cold. It is easier to rule a house that does not feel." "Is it easier to live in one?" I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She had said what she came to say. When she left, I discovered my hands were shaking. Not from her threat. Threats are loud. From my memory of cold houses. I found Kale in the library, a hush of paper and purpose. He was reading an old map as if it could confess. He looked up, and the concern arrived before the question. "What happened?" "Someone reminded me that kindness can be political," I said. He set the map aside. Kindness is always political. That's why it terrifies people who rule by scarcity. Do you trust her? I asked. I trust her to protect me from the wrong things, he said. And to fight me when I choose the right ones. In me? His mouth softened. I trust you to make me someone she cannot argue out of being. The answer found a leak in my composure. I exhaled like a window opening. Good, I whispered, because I'm afraid. He stood, not quickly, with the patient intention of a man walking toward a vow. He stopped close enough that the dust motes drifted between us like stars choosing new constellations. What do you need? He asked. Not rescue, I said. A partner. Then that is what I'll be. A beat. If you'll have me as one. On one condition. He waited. We do not build a kingdom that survives meanness by becoming mean, I said. Not even in small ways. Not even when it's faster. He smiled then, not the rare, pained curve, but something warmer, like a hearth choosing you back. Agreed. He offered his hand, palm up. Not a command, an invitation. I set my fingers in his, and nothing exploded. Sometimes the unthinkable is simply what we've forgotten to practice. Gentleness that holds its own weight. We stood like that until someone cleared a throat in the doorway. It was the stable master, hat crushed in his hands. Apologies, Your Majesty. There was a small matter. We followed him to the south stables, where the scent of singed straw still clung to the air. A small fire had started and died quickly, as if embarrassed. Cale crouched, ran 2 fingers through the ash, lifted them to his nose. Oil, he said, not accident. We walked the line of stalls. Horses stamped, uneasy. A lantern hung crooked, wick blackened by haste. On the far wall, a mark, 3 vertical lines cut into wood. Not a symbol I knew. Cale did. Old rogue sign, he murmured. For weakness. Whose? I asked. They meant mine, he said, standing. They wanted to shape a story. He feeds strays and forgets his gates. You didn't, I said. I almost did, he answered, and the honesty was a gift. For a breath. Then I remembered. Kindness is a defense if you build it right. We did what we had been doing since the night changed us, small things, thoroughly. We widened the watch without making a spectacle. We set water barrels outside places where children sleep. We replaced the oil near lamps with the thinner kind that refuses to misbehave. We asked questions without sharpening them into accusations. Before dawn, we found the boy. Not a rogue, a kitchen apprentice with a face like a closed window. He had been paid to leave a lantern where a lantern should not be. He had been told it was a test, not a torch. Cale spoke to him alone first. Then with me. Then with the cook who had raised him more faithfully than his own father. We did not break him to keep the lesson. We taught him how to carry it. When he left the room, he was still a boy. But he knew which doors to hold. That matters. By the time the sun climbed high, word of the fire had already retreated from rumor to footnote. People prefer dramas that end with screaming. We taught them to love the version that ends with breakfast. That takes longer. It lasts longer, too. Lisa found me again, this time carrying a ledger. Your rooms, she said, without preamble. I've written them into the household accounts. I raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously like consent. It's containment, she said, but the corner of her mouth betrayed her. Paper is how we keep kindness from being swallowed whole. Then devour the ink, I replied. I don't mind. She almost smiled. For some, almost, is how agreement begins. In the afternoon, Cale led a small procession to the east gate, no trumpets, no speeches. He knelt where the threshold met the road, pressed his palm to the stone, and closed his eyes. What are you doing? I asked, quietly, as if interrupting a blessing. Apologizing, he said. For what? For all the times I made this gate a weapon instead of a welcome. The captains looked at each other like men hearing holy words from a mouth they'd only known for war. Alina crouched beside him, solemn. After apology, she announced, comes a promise. What promise? Cale asked. That we won't make people knock so long, she said. He opened his eyes. Then that is the promise, he agreed, and pressed his palm harder, as if sealing a pact with the stone itself. We walked back slowly, a kind of procession that had nothing to prove and everything to sustain. Along the way, people joined without being asked, as if their feet recognized a route their hearts had mapped in the night. I fell into step beside him. "Do you ever miss the man you were?" I asked. He considered. "Sometimes," he admitted. He was simpler. He didn't ache. "And now?" "Now I ache," he said. "And I prefer it." I nod. "Ed, me too." We didn't take hands in public. We didn't need to. The space between us had learned the shape of an honest thing. Everyone could see it. No one named it. Some truths are more powerful when they're allowed to breathe. Evening returned with lantern light strung along the inner courtyards like patient stars. Someone had turned training drums into tables. Someone else had laid bread and stew where once only orders were served. Laughter found corners that had learned to hoard silence. The palace ate together. Kale stood, lifted a cup of water, not wine, and waited until the room chose quiet for him. "I won't say many words," he began, and the room smiled because kings always say many words when they promise few. He surprised them. He kept it brief. "Some of you fought last night. Some prayed. Some held doors. All of it mattered. We did not win a war. We practiced being a home. Tomorrow, we'll practice again." He looked at me then, not at the captains or the ancients or the advisors who needed footnotes. At me. "Arya will oversee the rooms we've opened," he said. "If you need, you go there first. If you can offer, you go there first. Ask her what you can carry. I trust her to ask you for the right weight." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, not the kind that hides, the kind that stands up straighter. I inclined my head, and the room accepted the appointment without a vote. Some leaderships are decided by usefulness and a child's faith, not by seals. After, as the tables thinned and small hands grew sticky with berries, Kale found me near the doorway under listen. The sign seemed to approve of his timing. "There will be another attempt," he said, not as prophecy, but preparation. "I know. Before it comes, I want one thing made clear." "What thing?" "Not to them," he said. "To us." He was close enough that the lantern above us flickered at the thought of it. I could feel the decision approaching, not in him alone, in the space we'd been building plank by plank since rain knocked courage into our lives. "What do you want clear?" I asked, soft. "That what began at a door," he said, "is not a debt to be repaid. It is a life to be shared." The words opened something behind my ribs that had been pacing restlessly for days. "Shared, how?" "As two people who will fail and learn and forgive in the same house," he said. "As partners who will never weaponize the word rescue. As a man who will not ask you to become small so he can feel large. As a woman who will not let me forget the laws we wrote when no one was watching." He paused, eyes unflinching. "I am not asking for an answer tonight. I am asking for your yes when you are ready, and your no if you are not." "Kale," I breathed, and his name felt like a safe stair under my feet. "I have been ready since you listened to a knock that wasn't meant for you." He exhaled. It sounded like winter leaving a room. "Then," he said, almost smiling, "we will make it known after the next storm passes. I won't hang a happiness where enemies can aim at it." "Wise," I said. "Alina will not forgive me if I ruin her celebration," he added. At her name, we both looked to where she sat between two guards who had become uncles overnight. She was telling them a story with her hands about honey cakes that are also laws. They listened like men receiving orders that tasted better than the old kind. I touched the lintel above us, the word listen humming against my fingertips. "After the next storm," I agreed. "We won't hide love. We'll announce it the way you announce dawn, by opening the curtains." "Good," he said. "Then I can sleep." "Can you?" "Sometimes," he said, "when you are within the same walls." I laughed quietly. "We are within the same walls now." "I know," he said, eyes gentling, "but now the walls know, too." The night deepened. Blue poured into darker blue. The courtyard emptied slowly, not from caution, but contentment. I walked Alina to our room, tucked her in, and braided her hair by moonlight. "Is Baba happy?" she asked around a yawn. "I think he is learning how to be," I answered. "Good," she murmured. "Then tomorrow we can teach the palace our song." "What song is that?" She was already asleep when she told me. "The one where everyone gets a turn." I kissed her forehead, stood, and looked out the window at a city that had begun to lower its shoulders. Somewhere on the eastern wall, a guard hummed to stay awake. Somewhere in the kitchens, a pot simmered for the morning. Somewhere beneath the old banner, a room remembered a mother's voice and forgave a son for needing it still. I lay down and let gratitude hold me. We had not ended danger. We had not cured malice. We had done the unthinkable in another way. We had refused to let fear be the only clever thing in the room. Tomorrow might bring fire, rumors, reconsidered loyalties. But tonight, a kingdom built from scars slept like a body that had found its pulse again. And as my eyes closed, I felt it, the weight of a quiet I trusted, the warmth of walls that sang, and the promise of a man who had learned to answer a knock with more than power. He had learned to answer with love. The next storm did not arrive with thunder. It came quietly, like a memory walking barefoot through the palace halls. The air felt heavy that morning, the kind of weight that makes even the walls hold their breath. Kale stood by the eastern balcony, cloak unfastened, eyes tracing the forest where smoke curled like ghosts deciding whether to rise or rest. He knew before anyone said it, He robes were moving again. This time, not to destroy. To surrender. I watched him from the doorway, my heart a tide that didn't know which shore to choose, fear or faith. He didn't turn when he spoke. "They're coming to talk." "Talk?" I asked softly. "Or finish what they started." He glanced at me, and there was no fury in his gaze anymore. Just quiet certainty. If they wanted war, they'd have sent smoke, not silence. "And if it's a trick? Then I'll meet it as a man who remembers how peace feels," he said. Not as the wolf who forgot. I wanted to stop him. I didn't, because love isn't a chain, it's trust. The council gathered before sunset. Every alpha from the neighboring lands stood in the courtyard, armor shining dull under the cloudy sky. Alina clung to my skirt, her small fingers steady and warm. She didn't understand politics, only people. When she saw the scarred rogues arrive, she whispered, "They look tired." "They are," I said. "Even hatred gets tired, little wolf." The leader stepped forward, head bowed, shoulders bent beneath more than guilt. Kale faced him with no guards at his back. The silence between them was thick, years of blood and choices condensed into one fragile breath. Finally, the rogue spoke. "We came to fight a monster. We found a man." Kale's voice was calm. "You found a home." The rogue's jaw clenched. "We don't deserve your mercy." "Maybe not," Kale said. "But you'll get it anyway. Because mercy isn't for those who deserve it, it's for those who need it most." The man looked up, eyes wet with disbelief. "What would you have us do?" Kale stepped aside, gesturing toward the open gates of the palace. "Start again." And just like that, the storm passed. No blood, no victory songs. Just footsteps crossing thresholds. That night, the walls of the Alpha King's palace echoed with something new, laughter from mouths that once shouted war cries. The scent of food instead of smoke. The sound of small hands clapping to a rhythm no one had to fear. Later, when the courtyard emptied, Kale found me standing beneath the moon. He didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. The night itself seemed to wait for his words. "It's over," I said quietly. "No," he replied, stepping closer, the silver in his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "It's beginning." He took my hand, calloused and careful. "When you came here, you didn't just survive, Arya. You changed everything I thought I knew about strength. And what did you learn? That strength isn't the roar of the Alpha," he said softly. "It's the heartbeat that keeps going when the world expects silence. The wind carried our words up to the moon, and for the first time in years, the moon didn't hide behind clouds. The next morning, the palace woke to celeb ration. Alina ran through the halls, wearing a crown of wildflowers the cooks had braided for her. She burst into our room with a smile too bright to refuse. "Mama," Baba said, "everyone's waiting." "Waiting for what?" I asked, laughing. "For your wedding," she shouted, bouncing with joy. He said the moon's already agreed. Kale appeared at the door, not the king, not the warrior, just a man in black linen, a softness in his eyes that could melt stone. "Is it true?" I asked, smiling through tears. He nodded. "I made her my messenger. She's relentless." Alina clapped her hands. "Because love is law." We both laughed, the kind of laughter that comes from surviving the long way around. The ceremony was held in the courtyard beneath the same moon that had once watched me cry. The wolves gathered not as soldiers but as witnesses. The rogues stood at the edges, heads bowed. The council watched quietly, as if seeing something they had never believed possible. Kale took my hand in his, warm, steady, certain. "Before the pack, before the gods," he spoke, "I, Kale of the bloodborne line, take Arya, not as a possession but as peace. Not to tame, but to trust. I was born a king. But tonight, I choose to be a man who loves." Tears blurred my sight, but I managed to speak back. "I, Arya of no clan and no crown, take Kale, not for his power, but for his heart. Not for his title, but for his truth. The world beat us down. Love built us back." The crowd went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then a voice rang out, small, clear, unshaken. "You may kiss her now, Baba." Laughter rippled through the courtyard, breaking the last of the old grief. Kale smiled, bent down, and kissed me, slow, gentle, eternal. That night, under the full moon, the palace shone with life. Children danced where soldiers once stood. The word home had finally learned its meaning. Kale stood beside me on the balcony, his arm around my shoulders, his voice a low promise against my hair. "I spent years building walls, Arya," he said. "You showed me what doors are for." I smiled, resting my head against him. "And she showed us how to knock." Below us, Alina laughed with the wolves, her small hands clapping to a rhythm that even the moon seemed to follow. And I thought, maybe this is what destiny was trying to tell us all along. That the unthinkable isn't rage, or revenge, or blood. It's love, the kind that walks through storms. The kind that answers every knock. The kind that builds a kingdom from scars and names it home. And so the little girl who once knocked on a stranger's door found her world again, a mother healed, a king reborn, and a home that would never know silence in the rain.